see. Still haven't figured that part out.
Oh, I put it in there, something like,
To be determined. Just a minute.
Good afternoon, everybody. We are now at our work session for Basalt Town Council, and first order of business is to go into executive session. We're going to be talking about the town manager's review. It's a personnel matter. It is a protected activity under state statute, and so I would entertain a motion from one of our counselors to move council into executive session.
Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session to discuss personnel matters in accordance with CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses F, more specifically, town manager review.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Okay, let's begin with Ryan Slack.
yes.
Thank you. Bill Kane.
Yes.
Thank you. Elise Huddle.
Yes.
Thank you. Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Infante.
Yes.
Thank you. Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Thank you. David Knight is absent this evening.
Can I ask a question, Jeff?
Motion
Okay.
carries.
All in person, do you have to do roll call anymore?
We don't, but
Just
there
checking.
does need to be a 2/3 vote on a motion to go into exec session, so it doesn't hurt, I guess.
So
We could do voice.
Checking.
here's the way I go with this, is that every time I go for a voice vote, they say, roll call. So I go roll call 100% of the time now until somebody checks me off. That's the safe.
Yeah, no, they're not needed.
It goes faster when you don't have to unmute yourself, so.
Yeah,
It's okay.
it's at least a little more efficient.
All right.
Okay, so I will leave, Caesar will leave. We'll close the doors. Jeff probably needs to make some announcement.
Yeah, let's figure out how to.
Oh, do you
Good for him.
Need another.
Thank you very much. Good, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 22nd, 2021 meeting of the Town Council of Town of Basalt. And we will get underway shortly. I think we also would like to extend a welcome to all of our viewers, including our Latinx community. So me gustaría decir hola y bienvenido para toda la gente que habla español en nuestra comunidad. Y si tienen preguntas o problemas, siente libre para contactar nuestra gente en Town Hall. Y somos cuidadores de toda la comunidad, no solo solamente inglés, pero españoles también. So, welcome, bienvenidos. So, with that bilingual introduction, I would like to begin the meeting with a roll call. Pam, if you'd handle that for us.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Gary Tenenbaum.
Here.
Thank you, Glenn Drummond.
Here.
Thank you, Bill Infante.
Here.
Thank you, David Knight is absent. Elise Huddle.
Present?
Thank you. Bill Kane.
Here and
Thank you.
present.
And Ryan Slack. Thank you. 6 of 7 are here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So our first order of business is to consider our consent agenda, which consists of the minutes from our June 8, 2021 meeting. And I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
All right, moved and seconded. Jeff, we good with a voice vote on this one? Yeah, got one. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Our consent agenda is approved. So our next order of business is a call for public comment. And at this time, we ask that any members of the public that would like to address council, please do so. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. Be nice, be civil. And I think we also have a call in. So we're still operating in a hybrid environment here while we have folks meeting face-to-face, we also have the ability for members of the community to call in. So Susan Philp will explain a little bit how you can do that if you want to make a call and address council.
Okay, the easiest way to access the meeting is there is a Zoom link on the first page of the agenda that you can pull down from the council agendas on the town's website. You can also dial 1-346-248-7799, and when prompted, the webinar ID is 920-7291-4366, and this information is also on the Grassroots TV screen. And I think so far that Pam doesn't have anyone additional that wants to be entered into the meeting. So if we maybe just give it 15 more seconds, I think we're probably good. So Mayor, it looks like
Okay.
no one has indicated that
thank
they'd
you.
like to speak.
So, hearing none, then we will turn to the next item, which is Mayor and Council reports and comments. So, floor is open for any comments from council or updates or reports. So, anybody have anything? I would like to offer a few things. One, I think probably, I'm sorry, maybe I'd look around before.
Nope, nobody.
No, go ahead, Bill, please. Go ahead.
Of reasonable general interest, I attended the Glenwood Springs hearing yesterday. The Garfield County Commissioners heard testimony related to the proposed development of the Ascendigo Ranch on Missouri Heights. And it was a very long meeting that continued through today and will continue into tomorrow. Chairman Martin invited comment of unlimited duration, and there were a large number of individuals who exploited that generous offer and spoke for more than an hour. It was awesome. And all of the definitions of awesome. And there were a lot of positions for children on the autism spectrum where they will provide educational services and outreach. And many on Missouri Heights are not particularly enthusiastic about this proposal, and they voiced their opposition at great length. But I guess the takeaway from my perspective was really about process and how we might ultimately conduct some of the processes that we imagine would invite some disagreement and be more contentious than others. But I can share that, Jeff, with you a little bit and just see how you might advise us and the mayor in the future if any such thing comes up. But there's no indication when they will rule on this. The staff report
This meeting is being recorded.
was extraordinarily objective in having evaluated all of the principal concerns associated with water, traffic, the potential to have to evacuate in the event of an emergency, and we'll see how the chips fall.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else before I launch on here? A couple of things. One is that we put together an update on the pool opening, and I don't know if I'm alone, but I've had the opportunity to interface with a good number of our good folks, our citizens in Basalt about the pool opening. I think there was something about the 98-degree day, and people could see the pool full and the lane lines are in, and it looks pretty tempting out there, but we're not quite there yet. So we did a little video on Monday, and it's out. It's on our town website. It's also on the community Facebook page. So it looks like we're thinking first week of July, and mechanical equipment's in. The robot pool's going to take some time. Ryan will give us a more detailed update. But at any rate, we are doing our best to get the word out and make sure people know that we're aware and that we're really conscious about trying to get this thing open as early as possible. And so, we haven't had people climbing over the fence yet or crawling under the fence, but we're like 5 degrees away from that, I think. The next item I would like to mention is, it's kind of a shout out for Glenn, and it has to do with the Wrongford Planning Commission. And, I think that we have a real opportunity now with all the new appointees. Brian and I got a chance to talk, and I think I would like to suggest that we put the idea out there that we formulate early in the campaign here, get a joint meeting with our Basalt Town Council, Planning Commission, and the Wrongford Planning Commission. And I don't know if this would be facilitated. It's just a basic idea here about trying to have some forum where we can talk about vision for planning and for growth and development in the Highway 82 corridor. And the magnifying glass, and Matt Shear, our county commissioner, is here for another matter, but so Matt, good to see you. And I just think we have an opportunity to hone in on the Highway 82 corridor, which in our world is a lot of Eagle County. So we know we have land use applications that have fired back up, and so I think it would be great for our town council to have a chance to interact with some of the Wrongford Planning Commission members and get a chance to maybe exert some thoughts about vision for the Highway 82 corridor. So that's out there.
Excuse me,
And
Mayor.
later on this evening, we're going to hear.
Sorry, we're not getting any broadcast sound, Caesar. According to Chief Knott, there's no broadcast sound. I'm sorry to interrupt.
It's on grassroots, but.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you guys on the Comcast channel right now.
Okay. He says there is audio on grassroots, but not on the Zoom.
The Zoom.
So do we need to maybe mute me and not that one, or unmute that one? Because I think all the sound goes through that one anyway, yeah. So,
I'm not gonna be able to know the difference.
Well, Chief Knott is on there. Maybe he could turn on his camera and just give us a thumbs up.
Well, he left because
Oh,
he
did he
couldn't
drop?
hear.
he
He
said
dropped
he's
off.
headed,
Yeah, you can tell him to log back on and just see, but I think
He
we're
can just
okay
text
because no one's on the Zoom right now,
Oh, that's a good point.
so it's just us. So I think we're good.
For now, but we do have people
have a
participating
presentation.
later by Zoom.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll check in with Chief, just tell him to get back on.
yeah.
he said he was headed over this way, so he may already be in his car.
I'm gonna text Catherine and tell her to go on Zoom.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, thank you.
No, it's good.
So how are we doing? Are we are we getting through to London? Are they able to get our transmission?
It's recording on grassroots, which is our most important.
So I was just commenting on 3 things: the pool, the idea of getting together with the Wrongford Planning Commission and our Planning Commission. It's a big group of people that I think it would be a meaningful and helpful gathering. And the last thing was about the amendment to our agenda, which people in the public probably didn't see, but we're fortunate tonight to have Matt Yamashita from Colorado Parks and Wildlife join us. And again, I don't know if I was the only one, but I've been receiving lots and lots and lots of communications about stage 2 fire restrictions and fire season, and lots of nervousness about operation of the shooting range and what the schedule for management of the shooting range and closure relative to stage 2, red flag warnings and all the rest that really have everybody on edge right now. So we'll do it again, but we thank Matt for coming on short notice. Having worked in the public sector, you work all day, and then that's the last thing you want to hear is get a call about another night meeting. So we know you're pretty busy these days, and we appreciate you coming up and talking to us about it. So that's that. So with that, we go to the manager's report if there are no further comments. Are there more comments? Anyone?
No.
okay?
Yeah, so I have a couple different things here. First, Mayor, I'll just use your prompt there with regard to Stage 2 fire restrictions. So both Chief Knott and I were on a phone call today with some of our area agency partners. And so as it relates to Stage 2, Pitkin County is going to go in tonight at midnight, so technically Wednesday morning, Stage 2. And then Eagle will be going in Thursday night at midnight, so technically Friday morning into Stage 2. And my understanding is that Summit County is following suit with that Stage 2 as well. And just a brief update, I think we're getting really good information from Eagle County, from the Forest Service, from Pitkin County putting out alerts on the Sylvan fire. As just a brief update, as of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, it is about 2,600 acres. And the fire crews are up there working hard. I believe that there are 2 helicopters on scene, and then there's about 75 personnel. And, essentially, it's up pretty high, and it is not down in the Frying Pan Valley. They're really trying to, contain it on that southern edge there so that it doesn't find its way down any of the drainages. And so this afternoon, we did know that there was that red flag warning coming. There were expected winds, at least what I heard this morning, about 25 miles an hour coming out of the west. And so we'll just continue to provide updates to council, but I really encourage folks to go to the EC Emergency, which is the Eagle County Emergency.org. And then, of course, that INCIWeb, which is INCIWEB, INCIWeb, is a great resource to get information. And it actually pops up as a map, interactive with your cell phone, and you can click on fires all over the state, all over the country. So that's a really good one there. And then, of course, on your telephones, if you're signed up for EC alerts or Pitkin alerts, definitely want to remind people to do that. So that's all I have on the fire for the moment. A couple other is that we did hear a brief update on the pool. Councilor Hoddle and I were actually out there this afternoon with some other staff doing a weekly check-in, and things are progressing. There were about 25 people on site today working busily. And while the pool is full of water, that water is not treated and it is not moving. So those are the two things, obviously, in order to make it safe. So there's some finishes in the mechanical room that are still needed. We did take a look at the new locker rooms, which are awesome and getting closer to being finished. And, there's pretty much, folks working on every element of the pool out there. And so it's coming together. And as the mayor mentioned, worst case scenarios will open in a phased way. That it's our goal to get people into the water in some form or fashion. So it may be that the big pool opens first and the robot pool follows. So we'll keep putting out information on that for people's knowledge, because we know it's hot and people want to get in the swimming pool. A couple other just quick things. Wanted to let folks know that our building official, Rick Fout, has taken another job, and he's now officially gone from the town as of Sunday. Excuse me. And we do have an interim person in, Mark Kittle, who was a council member here, but then also used to hold the job here in the town, and then was most recently in Snowmass before he retired. So big thanks to Mark for helping us out. We do have the job posted, and we'll be looking at a closing on that. I believe it was this upcoming Friday. So we shouldn't have interruptions for folks in service, but obviously, just given the volume of building that we have here, I know it made some of the builders out there a little nervous when your building official is leaving, but we're looking to keep that service high for folks. And then the only other thing I wanted to make mention of here is, I know the Coffee with Council, we had sort of I think that was the first one in quite a while. And, oh, thank you for those. I'll have just a couple more quick ones. But just to put it out there, I know Elise, you had attended the last one, and maybe a suggestion of, we currently have them scheduled for twice a month. Do we want to do twice a month? Do we want to do once a month? So that's one question that I would have. And then as far as communication on who might be able to attend, that was a comment, just so that, you know, you all are aligning if you're not able to get there. So I don't have a great solution for that today on how we facilitate that communication, but just throwing it out there to you all to think about. So we don't have to solve that right now, but if you want to have some more discussion on it, we can.
Would it be too much of a hassle to do email and RSVP for them in the future, so we don't get down to the, you know?
Possibly you could email Pam and just let her know if you were gonna be able to attend, and if we aren't getting anybody, then maybe we could send out a notice of cancellation or something like that. That seems like a pretty
That
Okay.
seems like-
easy way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the
that'd be good.
text thing was all off base. Thank you for that, Ryan. Thanks.
So.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll work on that. And then a couple other quick reminders. So this weekend up at Basalt High School, we have our recycling event that's in partnership with Eagle County. And there are a large number of hard-to-recycle items that we'll have up there. So I believe it includes, you know, household paints, office paper, tires, I think is one of
Yep.
them.
Appliances.
Electronics, appliances, and were we doing some brush at that one? Or is
Yes, we're
it
doing brush
as
too.
well?
And you can go online and under our news section of the webpage, and there's a list of materials that are acceptable.
So that's a pretty awesome event. One thing, and we believe that the lot is going to be plenty big, but we also potentially have a shelter at the Basalt High School should a mandatory evacuation occur for the Frying Pan Valley. And so, but we believe that, you know, both of those are big enough, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that that doesn't present itself. And then two more quick things. Sunday market, our first happened this last Sunday. It was awesome. I've heard really, really good feedback. I think people were really happy to be back out, seeing each other.
It was the biggest crowd I'd ever seen. On
that
most
great?
booths. I was gonna add that, so kudos to staff for grinding it out. It was,
Awesome.
I couldn't believe how many people were there.
That's great. Lots of excitement about it, obviously. Thanks for that feedback, Ryan. And then the last thing is, tomorrow night, so we're doing the Wednesday night live, the Buskers again, this summer. That'll start tomorrow evening. It kicks off, and, you know, we have it in both the Willits area and in downtown area. So multiples in each location, trying to get people out and about and enjoy some live music and performances. So we really encourage people to use Wednesday nights as an excuse to get out of the house and patronize our restaurants and see each other. So that's all I have for you, Mayor.
Great. Well, that's quite a bit. Thanks. Appreciate it. Any questions for our town manager before we move on? Okay, next order.
There's a comment on here about the Basalt 2030 update. Did you cover that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh.
I did everything.
That was.
Thank you, thank
Oh,
you.
you're just saying because it was written on the agenda.
Yes.
It's on the agenda.
Yeah, that's probably why.
That's the only one we actually wrote.
No, that's great. Thank you for the reminder, Elise. So last night, we actually had our third capital needs committee meeting, and we're making progress with those folks. Well, last night we reviewed a bit sort of a decision matrix as they're kind of wrestling with the various projects that could be forwarded ultimately to council to decide whether or not we put forth a ballot question in November. But This week, you as residents should have received in your mailbox a survey. So we really encourage folks to take that survey. Along with that paper survey is an explanation just to be able to bring people up to speed on what the Basalt Forward 2030 effort is. The implementation of the master plan is explained in detail, and then also the facility needs assessment, and so that's a really good resource. We are, however, you can fill it out with that piece of paper and send it back. It does not come back to town staff. Ultimately, that gets processed by Bill Ray, who's a consultant with the town, so it does remain anonymous. But then we really do encourage people to go to the website that's cited on there, which is the letstalkbasalt.net. So we have till, is it July 2nd? July 3rd to fill those out, and we want to get as many responses as we can. So please tell your friends and neighbors and family, and look forward to getting those back. So thanks.
Good deal. Any
No, I'm really done.
questions for town manager? Okay, great. Okay, so our next order of business are our presentations, and the first order of business is that we're going to chat with Matt Yamashita, and it looks like he's got some CPW gents with him, so he's got some backup here in case things get really rough. So, Matt,
can
come
all
on
come
up
up
to
if you
the
like.
chairs here if you don't mind. So, Ryan, do you want to tee this
You're
up?
on your own, Matt.
That was awesome. That was awesome.
So, Matt, thanks for coming tonight. We really appreciate you coming on short notice. We're nervous in the service again about, here we are, summer, and we're back to fire season again. And, I don't know if I'm the only counselor, but I spent a good number of hours over the weekend trying to answer questions about the shooting range, and there's a lot of misconception out there. We have some citizens that believe that there were automatic closure of the range with stage 2. I tried to correct the record, but I think it would really be very useful and helpful for the public to hear from the horse's mouth. Nothing personal there, but to hear from CPW directly about where we are. I think we should remember that our previous council did adopt a resolution requesting that the range be closed under stage 2 provisions, and so that's the official town position until this council would take up any amendment to that resolution. That continues to be our town position, so we would like to put that back in front of CPW, but we'd like to hear what your impressions are and what the state of play is going to be, what we should expect in coming weeks here about operation of the range. So again, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thanks. I appreciate the invite. Council, I appreciate always getting the opportunity to speak in front of you guys and interact with you guys. As one of your neighbors to the north, I think it's important we continue to engage and have these conversations. Just real quick, for those that don't know me, Matt Yamashita, I'm the area wildlife manager with Colorado Parks and Wildlife out of Glenwood Springs. In the room behind me here is Darren Chacon. He's the assistant area wildlife manager out of Glenwood as well. Kind of helps me with a lot of the property related operations. And Peter Boyott is the district wildlife manager assigned to the Basalt district for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure that when I received the invite, that we showed up in person. I mean, it's something that is important enough to us that given the option of attending, virtually, appreciate that consideration. But if I can't make a 45-minute drive to get over here and have that conversation with you, probably in the wrong line of work. It's something that we need to be able to connect on that and answer whatever questions you have, and just show that we are committed to working with you on all fronts, and that we're listening whenever you're talking. Regarding this past weekend, just like you received several inquiries, from the public, from both citizens in support of, citizens hoping that the range was getting closed down, a lot of clarification type inquiries. And I talked with Sheriff James Van Beek last week in order to get kind of ahead of that, knowing that we were moving into stage 1 fire restrictions as of last Friday. So as we moved into stage 1 restrictions, we're aware that in Eagle County, as we have red flag warnings, that it warrants heightened stage 2 restrictions in there. Included in those stage 2 restrictions are the prohibition of recreational shooting on both public and private lands. And you know, that comes with a shade of gray in there, and where there was some clarification needed was that the public portion of that definition was interpreted by the sheriff and myself as being on county-owned public lands. So when it comes to state-owned public lands and federally owned public lands, you know, he references that jurisdiction. He refers it back to whether it's the state or federal agencies that manage those lands and that have the authority to implement whatever restrictions that we're going to enact on those lands. Regarding Basalt shooting range, you know, that occurs on CPW, state-owned property. CPW is the managing authority there, so any restrictions or otherwise would be implemented by us. So I had that discussion with Sheriff last week, clarified again over the weekend, and then I was on the fire call this morning with all the fire managers, discussed, just like Ryan was mentioning, discussed the implementation of moving to stage 2 coming up here later this week. With that in mind, my staff and I spent a significant amount of time on the site yesterday, you know, looking at range use, discussing what some of the mitigation efforts have been, how they currently stand, what the fire hazards are, the potentials for fire, and then looking at the long-term forecast, both the short-term and long-term forecast, referencing that against what was discussed amongst fire officials and authorities this morning at the restrictions meeting. We're going to move toward closure of the range starting on Thursday. So the range is closed by regulation tomorrow on Wednesdays, always closed. That'll give us a day to get signage in place, reach out to, you know, people that utilize the range on a commercial basis, get them the information on what the plan is, what we're doing, and then we'll have signs in place come Thursday. It's closed until conditions improve. You know, at which time we'll go through, reassess, make sure proper mitigations in place as well, so that we're moving forward, you know, eyes wide open. It's something that wanted to make it pretty clear that, you know, this decision was made by local staff with the recommendation from us to our regional manager, to our director, and this was based on discussions that we had with the sheriff. We had this with the U.S. Forest Service, with this forest supervisor, and with the local fire chiefs, just trying to make the best informed decision. We reference them a lot on those decisions, as they have fire staff. You know, they have staff members that are paying attention to and monitoring the fire conditions. We don't have that on staff, so even though we're in charge of the state-owned lands around here, we need to reference the people that do have that expertise, and that's what we've done in this case. So I'll leave it at that for now, just because I know there's probably some questions or some other outstanding things that I haven't addressed, so.
I think you answered a lot of questions right there, but Gary.
I don't have a question. I just thank you for coming and responding to it, because it is amazing in the last 3 or 4 days how many people have asked me, is like, you know, is the shooting range going to stay open or not? So I appreciate you guys taking it seriously, and you know, I think it's going to calm a lot of people down that you're going to close it, and when conditions warrant, you know, obviously it'll be reopened. This is not, you know, a way to close it for the summer, but I think it'll definitely get people, especially in my neighborhood where we are, calm down a little bit, because it's just reminding us all of 2 years ago. So thank you.
Bill?
Matt, I got to add my thanks too, because I know it's a courageous move, but it is a community-focused move that I'm sure is going to make a lot of people happy, and other people are not going to be so happy. But I really do, I think the community that's reached out to me, we will all be very much relieved, and thank you for listening to the voices that have called for greater prudence and greater transparency, which you have brought over the past 3 years. We had a lot of conversations in the summer of 2018, and I think our relationship has come an immense distance. It is unrecognizable as compared to what we had, and frankly, I think this is a partnership that's going to deliver great benefits to the people of Basalt, but also to the community of the valley as a whole. So thanks.
Thanks for the feedback. One additional plug I'd like to add in there, at the request of some of the other land management agencies and sheriff and myself. This closure, while it's in place here specific to this range, we're aware that, there's recreational shooting will still likely occur. We would strongly encourage that people don't take the recreational shooting practices in unimproved areas where there's still a immense risk for fire. One of the discussions that we had in coming to this decision was what that risk may look like in other locations. We've seen it in past times when we've closed this range and displaced that shooting activity onto adjacent public lands. The conditions on everything surrounding here are just as bad as what we're seeing with the grasses here. The one comment that was made to me is from some of the fire folks is that they were trying to get us to keep this range open because we've got some grass up there that can burn right now, not a lot else. A grass fire is something they can fight. If we were to start a fire or fire were to occur in some of the oak brush and pinyon juniper around here, that's a significantly more difficult task to try to fight that fire and contain it. So my ask is of anybody paying attention or anybody that has connections, please pass the message, to not encourage recreational shooting at this time. And that goes, from pretty much across western Colorado. Right now is just not the time to be exercising that portion of your hobbies. So,
Yeah.
Find the right places to do it, and we'll try to accommodate as we can. But right now is just not the right time or place for this range to accommodate.
Don't forget about Cameo. That's a good option.
Cameo's a great option. Go down there. It's a little bit further of a drive, but thanks for mentioning that. It is a good alternative option. So
That's great. And, I'll just take the opportunity to thank our Roaring Fork Valley Sportsmen's Association, which has really been doing a great job of looking after the range. I think the safety improvements have been significant, and as a kind of a citizens organization, those guys have done a whale of a great job of operating, and I just hope everybody on that side of our community understands the importance of managing that facility in times of such great fire risk, which is, unprecedented. And I think we're now getting reports that this is the greatest drought in 1,200 years, so that's pretty significant. So we really appreciate your, attending to this and coming up and talking to us and making tough decision here, but we all appreciate it, and I think the community will appreciate it too.
I was just gonna say, on a good note, Ryan and I met with Matt and Darren and Peter, and there's some good things that are gonna come of this relationship. Lake Christine, what we could do with Lake Christine, and how that whole, not only Lake Christine, the lake itself, but how the whole, CPW state land interacts with the town of Basalt. I think we're gonna have a really good, fruitful conversation with them in the future on a lot of things. So this is a very cool relationship that's been developed, and so good things are coming.
Good comments, thank you. Any other questions for Matt Yamashita, CPW? We had some fishing questions, but we'll hold those for another time.
we'll answer those ones later.
I actually do have a question. Matt, what is the story on the new CPW requirement that people be licensed to use trails and the river beginning on July 1st? Or at least that's the sign that's at the Iron Bridge takeout or at the Carbondale takeout. It says, as of July 1st, CPW will require you to have a license to use this river. And it doesn't specify fishing. The implication is if you want to raft, if you want to sup, if you want to go through CPW portions of the river, you gotta have a license. And so, I mean, I got a fishing license, I'm not worried about it, but what if I got people on my boat who don't have fishing licenses?
That's a great question. If you can reference back to a conversation, I believe it was last year we had regarding the Basalt State Wildlife Area, same regulation that affected Basalt, and it was a statewide regulation that was implemented, requiring a fishing license, hunting license, or now they have a new access pass that has come into play. Any of those are required in order to access CPW-owned properties. There's 2 boat ramps on the Roaring Fork River. The one over in Carbondale, that's through a lease agreement with Town of Carbondale, and then we own fee title, the other one commonly referred to as the West Bank boat ramp there. Those ones both require, because they're managed as state wildlife areas by CPW, require a hunting license, fishing license, or an access pass to use the property. To answer your question, if there's anybody over the age of 18 that's going to be on the property, needs to have some sort of a license that will allow them access on there. Just for clarification, the portions of the river there, navigable waters, are not owned by CPW.
Okay.
It's just the boat ramp proper itself.
Got it. Okay, so if we float past Carbondale, no problem. Okay, that was a little bit of a concern.
And that's not July, that was July 1st last year?
Correct. That regulation was passed and started last year.
I was like, I gotta go this week because it starts next.
No, it actually started last year. Typically what we do, anytime we implement new regulations, is there's essentially a 1-year kind of a grace period, a learning portion to that, where we'll go through and enforce it, but it's paired with a heavy educational campaign in order to get people on board. So starting this year, July 1 is kind of the end of that grace period. We'll be looking to actually enforce it with citations. Obviously, citations are just for us another form of education, so if we can utilize education as our main campaign, we still will.
Any further questions, comments? Matt, thanks very much. Appreciate you coming up. And
Thanks for the invite.
appreciate the news, too. That's really going to help us get the word out to our community, so appreciate you.
Perfect. And as we progress, continue to pass questions along. We'll stay engaged, so you guys will know whenever we're making any movement to reopen things or doing anything different.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
So that leads us to our next order of business, item 7B. This is Eagle County Climate Action Collaborative. We have a memo of understanding with Eagle County. Commissioner Matt Shear came all the way from Eagle, Colorado, to talk to us tonight. So Matt, come on up. Come on down. Have a comfortable seat there. And
I feel like it's
I think Ryan's going to tee this up for us.
Yeah, sure. I'll just give the perspective of the town and why Matt might be here talking to us tonight. So thanks for joining us. But the town, the topic is the Climate Action Collaborative, and essentially building sort of a governance model around that. And I'll let Matt describe that portion of it. But just for everybody's general knowledge, that the town did join the Climate Action Collaborative in 2017, and we actually created our own Basalt addendum to the Climate Action Plan. And so what we're going to hear from tonight is sort of a description of this governance model that I think Matt and probably others are talking to the other members and the other members of the Climate Action Collaborative, other governments, special districts, and the county, of course. So with that, I think that's enough on my end. If you want to describe the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding that you're asking us to adopt.
Yeah, thank you. Is that okay too? Standing up at the...
Oh, yeah, it'd be great.
Feels like I'm subject to the congressional hearing when I'm over there. So thank you. It's really great to see everybody in person and both top and bottom of your faces as well. So I was excited to come over here. And Mr. Mayor, let me ask you too, you are all familiar with the Climate Action Plan and the collaborative as well, but since you have a broadcast audience, do you want me to give a little background on the plan and collaborative itself?
Sure. Sure.
So as Ryan mentioned, it was about 5 years ago, the county funded a climate action plan, and that involved a lot of research to essentially determine what we believe our greenhouse gas emissions were at a particular baseline year, and then also create a plan around how we might go about reducing that greenhouse gas. And after getting that plan done, the people that were involved from towns of Basalt and Eagle and everywhere kind of had a sense that somebody ought to own this, and it shouldn't belong to any one particular authority in our county, including Eagle County. So they created the Climate Action Collaborative, and all of us who joined that, including the county and most of the towns, did it by, I think, we called them letters of intent at the time. And part of those letters of intent, when we signed that too, we said, okay, one of the first things we'll do is create a governing body for this, and we just never got around to it. So that is one of the motivations for now finally creating this governing body. To my mind, yes, we needed to do that 4 years ago, but I think we've also seen in the past 4 years sort of the consequences of not having done it. And to me, what that has meant is what I'll say is the operations of the collaborative, and that is housed under Walking Mountains. So we all contribute money, and that goes to fund this Climate Action Collaborative work. So Kim Schlepfer and some others at Walking Mountains do a lot of that work, and what they do is a lot of the research, coming up with, say, programs, and we've just done a revision of that climate action plan, so the goals have been updated. And she works with working groups, including a building working group, a renewable energy working group, to do a lot of this work. But we all know too that, you guys have declared a climate emergency, that a lot of the work that's going to happen with climate has to happen on the policy side. And that means us as elected officials and government bodies. So a lot of that work in kind of the operational piece of the collaborative has been great, but we haven't had a whole lot of success implementing in the policy side. I think we've all individually done a lot of things relative to climate, but we also know that in the last 5 years, relative to our goals, we've actually come pretty close to achieving our goals, and almost all of that success is due to Holy Cross greening its grid. So were it not for Holy Cross, we as policy organizations would be looking at ourselves and figuring out what had gone wrong and what we need to do. And I think that's what we're doing right now. So the idea with this is to create a nexus between what's happening with that functional work, to say, here are the things, here's where we are, here's where we need to be, and here's a whole lot of ways we think we can get there. And even though there are some things that we can do as policy organizations, that original idea was we have to work this together, because for a lot of the issues that we see as governing bodies, we have our political boundaries, but we all know that, particularly here, where you've got 3 different counties you deal with, nobody thinks about that on a daily basis. A lot of people cross several county lines on their way to and from work. They don't think about it that way. They think about it as one community. And that's really how we function from a carbon perspective as well. And so that was the idea, is we have to figure out how to do this across political boundaries. So that idea is, let's create this governing body that is both responsible to the objectives of that plan, that's managing, budget, making sure that that money is being spent well, that it's doing what we think we wanted to do, and also create that sense of ownership and responsibility to it. So that when we say, here's what we need to do, and here's some of the things that each policy organization may need to do, that we are the ones who are coming up with those ideas, or at least endorsing them. As we all know as council, we're the 1% inspiration, and this is the 99% perspiration. Staff does the work, but we're the ones who tell them what to do, and we're the ones who say, who ultimately make those decisions. So it's got to be up to us. So what we're trying to do now is create that body. Before I go into what we've structured in there, the MOU does it. It's a very high-level structure of a governing board, simple 2 pages, bulleted. So I'll stop there without going into that too much and see what questions you all may have at this point. or just let me know if you want me to talk about that structure.
Questions for Matt?
Elise, hello, by the way, the only one I haven't been able to say hello to.
I would like you to talk about that structure. I'm totally in support of this, but my biggest concern is I feel like there are a lot of organizations in this space that are overlapping, and are we all just stepping on each other's toes? How do they interrelate? How does, I'm on the core board, Community Office for Resource Efficiency. They've been asked to join another organization. There's Energy Smart Colorado. There's just so many organizations out there that I just want to make sure that this is like going to be effective and that we have like sort of a targeted goal for this organization that's, specific, that it's not duplicating efforts elsewhere.
Yeah. So it's actually a bit to that point is the reason we came up with the structure we did. Because there have been so many people, so many organizations and people involved with the collaborative, so Holy Cross Energy, other metro districts, the school district, Water and Sanitation District, Vail Resorts, who have been involved to some degree. They contribute money, or they're having people at these working groups. So when we thought about how do we do this board, it was really like how do you include everybody and really have an effective board? So what we did was, well, we don't want to stop the really effective work of all those people who are engaged with the collaborative. So let's not mess with that operations, but we need to have governance. And when we talk about governance, this really should be representative of everybody. And the only way to do that without overlapping is to have elected officials from all of those entities that don't have any political overlap. So we came up with an 8-seat ex officio board. That means there's 1 seat for the county and 1 seat for each of the municipalities within the county. So that leaves off Holy Cross Energy, who's the largest contributor outside of Eagle County. That leaves off some metro districts who are elected officials, but they also overlap with county or towns or somebody. So it was both a size question of how do you get a manageable size board that will do things without talking about things too much, and still having representation. So these are people who ultimately are elected, not to that board, but they are elected by the community. And so it gets to that responsibility and ownership. And so when we make those decisions, we say, this is what we need to achieve, then we have some level of accountability that goes back to the elected office that is accountable to the public. And with that structure, it does get rid of a lot of questioning who has authority. Is it the more you pay, the more you get to say? We wanted to avoid that. And so that was the structure we came up with. Now, more to your point about having another organization, that, to my mind, is still a question. When we started this process to think about, do we have a governing body? The first, this is what Adam Palmer would always do to us when he presented. He'd always come and tell you after you said, go and do this and come back. And he's like, all right, first option, do nothing. And that's, to my mind, it was always saying, you asked us to do all this work. Do you want to be a hypocrite and do nothing? And of course the answer is no, but you always frame it that way. You can do nothing. And so that, where was I going with that?
Overlapping organizations.
Overlapping organizations. So the first question is, do we need the collaborative? And I still don't necessarily know the answer to that question, but what we see everywhere is all of us government entities doing the things that we have within our box of influence. And in many ways, we are encouraged, even statutorily, not to cross those lines. And we haven't had success with that model. So the idea with this is to have something that is effectively neutral, but then we can come back and have that responsibility to our boards. Without being too vague about it, let me give you an example of how I think that might work. So the working group for buildings did a whole lot of work. What they ended up doing is coming to different boards and ultimately to the county commissioners as well, and telling us about the work they did and what their objectives were, and we want to change building code. Their ideal was, particularly when you think about Eagle Valley or even more so in the Roaring Fork Valley, where it's even more complicated with different political lines. When you're building, the most efficient way to do it is get rid of as much bureaucracy as possible. Well, one of the best ways you can do that is not have a different code every time you cross some political boundary and you have to figure out what code is happening here and here. For you guys, that's in the middle of your town, well, not necessarily, but crossing over into, say, Eagle County, where it's a different building code. So they said, we'd like to have consistency. That will help builders and trades. They don't have to keep relearning everything. They learn it once, they've got everything they need to know. It also makes enforcement much easier for all the authorities. And what they wanted to do was go to every building cycle adoption. That's every 3 years. Town of Vale does that. I don't know if anybody else does. But that's a pretty big reach for most authorities. That was their ideal. And then they told us when they came and they said, but what we've decided to do is every other building cycle, or every other code cycle, to try and get everybody on that same page. And Jeannie, we had just seen this presentation on climate where the speaker had said, we have to stop doing what's feasible and start doing what's necessary. Because we know with climate, there's no 99% success. You either succeed or you don't. And so she asked, like, but what you were saying, it had to be every building code cycle. Is that what we think is necessary? And they said, yes. She's like, well, then if we're going every other building cycle, are we just doing what's feasible? And they said, well, yes, but it's feasible. And she said, but what's necessary is what we have to do, correct? They're like, yes, but. And she said, well, what I see as the issue here is we didn't tell you guys to go out and do this. We didn't tell you what the objectives were. You decided at this group of essentially staff people, because they're not elected officials, what you wanted to do, and then you went out and talked to all the authorities, and they told you what they'd probably be willing to work for, and that's what you backed into. Whereas, let's say we as the county commission, or if you all had said, listen, you go figure out what is necessary. We know this is going to be hard. You figure out what's necessary and you come back and tell us. Well, Adam would come back and say, well, you don't have to do anything. But you said you want to do something. You want to achieve your climate goals. And this is the only way that we think you can do that. Otherwise, here's your goal and here's where you're going to land. And we'd say, okay, we have to do this. So what are the hurdles? Well, Town of Minturn was saying, we can't afford to do that. All this, going through the code, all this adoption every year, we can't afford it. Well, that's a hurdle that Minturn, every 3 years, makes its decision. There's no alternative to not affording it.
Yeah.
But if we had a collaborative where we said, what is everybody's hurdles? And it came back to that board who said, this is what we asked you to do. And we came back and said, here are the hurdles to doing it. Gypsum says all of its contractors would just be overwhelmed and they couldn't keep up with that. Minturn says it can't afford it. Here are all the hurdles. We as a group can say, well, is there anything that we can do to solve that? Maybe we can collectively as a collaborative go out and get a grant for Minturn. Maybe we create a training program for everybody in the valley so that everybody's on the same playing field, whatever it is. We now start to look at those hurdles as things that we can achieve, whereas towns, we do not do that. It's within our box. So it's an ability to open up the box. So that was a very long-winded answer of seeing what we hope the advantage of this would be.
Well, I guess, Bill, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I got a bunch of questions, Matt, and we've had a lot of discussions about promoting interjurisdictional coordination between the counties, municipalities, and other districts within this valley, for sure. So I think it's a great initiative. There are a lot of pretty specific questions that I have that come up, beginning with mandate. What is the mandate of this collaborative that would ultimately be formed, and from where do you derive the authority to implement the mandate? I work for the UN, great institution. We had no authority to implement, execute, or enforce. So at the end of the day, you come up with, wonderful normative statements about what people should do, and you can't enforce a damn thing anywhere. And so that then becomes the bugaboo. It undermines the ultimate credibility of what you're trying to accomplish. So those are the two of the questions, mandate authority, then big question about budget. How are you guys gonna fund this? How are you gonna define the objectives, and how do you know when you succeed? Like, what's the goal that is universally adopted? And then you said that Holy Cross wouldn't be a part, which was one of my original questions. What's the role of the private sector? And private sector, not only whatever commercial, but also the nonprofit NGOs, the Rocky Mountain Institute, Aspen Global Change Institutes. How do they fit into all of this if the board is public sector?
All right. I hope you wrote all those questions down, because I'm not going to remember
I
them.
did. I don't expect to answer tonight on all of
Backwards from recency, I can remember. So the question for all those entities, and this is what we first did, is went through all of these partners who had been part of the collaborative to say, this is the structure. It looks like you're not at the table. But the whole idea is don't mess with that operation. Like what Holy Cross does, what Honeywagon does, anybody involved with it, we still want to have that level of engagement. So the hope is you at least don't mess with that and hopefully make it better. That this would better resource the work of the collaborative because we would be more engaged with it as opposed to once a year someone showing up to ask for money for it. So that's the hope with all of those partners, that work still keeps them engaged. Then getting to the governance piece, to your point, this has no authority. This is not a statutory thing. It's established with an MOU, which is not a legally binding document. So it, in some sense, adds bureaucracy because it's one of those necessary bureaucracies where we're trying to create a nexus between that work and we boards. So you all will eventually appoint 2 people if you agree to this MOU. And those 2 people will, attend meetings, I think once this is established, we're thinking like quarterly, very high level governance. And then coming back and engaging with your own board to say, this is where the direction we're heading, and have that conversation with your, representing your town, and then coming back to the collaborative. So it adds this kind of layer of bureaucracy, but also connecting to that work. So using the UN as your example, the UN has no authority, but does the UN have no value?
No, I would argue that it does. It's a normative body that establishes standards that we all operate under in millions of dimensions.
So this being an experiment, more of an experiment than the UN is now, because it was an experiment many years ago, can we make sure that we do that? Can we make sure that we don't serve the bureaucracy that we've created, that we're really serving the objective effectively? Is this going to work? And it goes back to my question. Is this going to work? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just know that what we have been doing hasn't worked.
Hasn't worked, yeah. I'm with you on that.
So it could be maybe in 2 or 3 years we decide, all right, this needs to be, at least a nonprofit. Let's do another organization. I don't know. But it is a piece of action that is different from the ineffectual actions that we've done so far, is the idea. Did I get to them all? Funding.
No, but I'll send them to you and we can talk more. But I guess
funding's important. It's
yeah.
We have funded, and so one of the key differences, I don't know how it will be funded. What we have done in the past was Kim Schlepfer came up with kind of a formula. It was initially based on your carbon output, but for example, Vail, who's our Aspen in that valley, said, geez, we're paying a heck of a lot more than Eagle and Gypsum are, but aren't they part of our tourism economy that drives this carbon? I think they're right. So they said, no, we're not going to pay that. We'll pay this. So it was very much like community funding models in your budget cycle. I don't know if you always have nonprofits coming in asking for money. It was very much like that, pay money and then you go solve climate and come back and tell us how you did. And well, we didn't do great because you guys are the ones that actually have to do it. So the funding, I think this first year is going to look a lot like it has in the past. I was hoping to up it a little bit more, but in the future, and actually probably very soon, just probably not in time for this budget year, this board ought to be involved in saying, well, what's the budget? What's the budget paying for? Is this what we think we should be spending money on? Should we spend more money? Should we spend less on this?
Yeah.
Ultimately doing exactly what we do here in government, deciding on that budget, and then it becomes that board's responsibility to fund it, just like we do here. Whereas so far, it's just Kim trying to get whatever money she can to do it,
Yeah.
but it's our responsibility, so
Yeah.
we should be involved in it.
Yeah, it just seems that, you know, that if the CAC could certainly serve up recommended legislation, but any legislative act can't, and our attorneys here can say it more eloquently than I can, but there's no way we can abrogate or delegate
Right.
our authority to folks that are not, you know, basically elected directly. I mean, so one way to deal with that territoriality issue is to have CAC formulate the request if it's legislative in nature, and then there's no way you get around it. You serve it up to the localities, and then everybody has 30, 60 days to turn it around and get it back, and that's what we sign up and, you know, provide our best efforts, and that's the world we live in, unfortunately. You know, there's
And I think it's even more than that. I'm hoping for a higher level of engagement just than, you know, the CAC coming and telling, you know, the town of Basalt, well, here's what you guys ought to do with waste.
yeah.
I would envision this more of, say, well, let's figure out holistic waste and then how that works as a whole waste system, rather than trying to fix what Basalt does or what the county does.
Yeah.
That whole thing, and then each authority clearly has a role. And as the board, we've all worked that out together and, you know, have been communicating back to our boards, just doing your updates about here's what we're looking at. So that then there has been engagement and ownership with every board. When you come to a solution, it's not, here's the idea for you guys, go do it. Like, well, I didn't
Yeah.
ask for that. So at that point, you should already be aware that it's happening. You should be aware of the direction it's heading.
Yeah.
You should know what's coming before you before
Yeah,
it gets asked.
That'd be great. Yeah.
And we
Yeah,
don't do that
so-
now.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody at this table loves the energy, they love the idea. We are bound by the nettlesome requirements of representative government, so that's kind of where it's at.
I mean, I personally think it's a good idea. You're forcing a conversation to be had that's not being had.
I'm sorry?
You're forcing a conversation to be had that's not being had, so I like the idea. I support it.
I support it. I think it's, you know, right now, I'd like to throw everything possible at this problem. I mean, really, truly. And I've seen it for all the years I've been part of government. That's one of the biggest frustrations Auden had by sitting on this board. It's just that we're so small and we don't think bigger. And this is a way, it might not do anything, but this is a way that we at least could broaden, you know, our representation and our collaboration, and I like the way Matt, I'm hoping it goes that way, the way you just said it, is you don't come to us and like, here's your problem, go fix it. It's just like, okay, here we've come with a problem and a solution, and, you know, if you need more, obviously, town's here to talk about it.
Yeah, one way you might approach it is that if rulemaking is called for, which it inevitably will be, that you guys draft it and then it gets submitted to localities for ratification. So we would still have to ratify it by ordinance, no doubt, but nevertheless, that might be the way to structure it. So basically, the language, the actual rule is actually drafted by CAC, and then, you know, we can act on it. That might be a more expedient, direct way to de-bureaucratize the whole process.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like the policy statement for CC4CA.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of a model, as painful as that is, Elise.
Yeah.
It is a tremendous process that really gets to something that we have seen CC4CA do amazing things with.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm in
it's similar
support
there.
of
The
that.
CC4CA doesn't have any authority from any counties. All it has is direction. And ultimately, it's just being essentially an extended staff. And that's, the collaborative itself, again, isn't going to really do anything about carbon. That's us as governments that have to do it. But we'll have, a round table of all of us sitting there figuring out what painful things are we gonna do, and do we have each other's backs, because it's sometimes gonna hurt.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when we get it done, we should also get the credit.
Well, Ryan, where do we want to go with the MOU? Is this something that has Jeff reviewed this? Is this going to come back to us as a action
Basically says
item? Is it-
We can adopt it
We
now.
can
if you
adopt
want.
it right now.
My suggestion would be to have me review it and then bring it back and put it on consent. And if there's material things I think that would be
Okay.
worth addressing with town council, I'll bring them up, but otherwise,
Yeah.
that's my recommendation.
Just one other comment. We were thinking that we would put it on the regular agenda just because the other piece of this is that it calls for the council to appoint a regular member. There's a regular member and an alternate. And so both of those positions could be town councilors. Currently, Sarah Nadoni serves as the representative from the town of Basalt. So she can, if you want, she can be the alternate, but we definitely need to have a council representative.
CC4CA or something?
Yeah,
So,
we had
think about-
changed, the primary needs to be an elected
Yeah,
official.
aren't you-
The secondary can also be,
Yeah.
but, yeah, Sarah could also be still alternate and still be involved.
So,
It's
At
kind
least
of a
would be
Northwest
one.
Cog model anyway.
So I think you have direction
Yeah.
to,
yep, we'll just
Yeah.
put it on the
Bring it
next
back
agenda and you guys think about who wants to serve.
Okay. Elise just said she does.
Matt,
Did you
I'll
say
send-
that?
I'll send you the questions that I had and
I'm
add a little
definitely
bit more
interested.
meat to 'em.
Okay.
Just because, we had tried with Kathy and with commissioners out of Pitkin to deal with three very specific issues, energy, broadband, and housing last year, with three different models for interjurisdictional cooperation. And there were some pretty formidable obstacles where the policies are conceived and where the work is done was basically where the pitfall was.
Yeah.
That was the Achilles heel that killed the whole thing, as far as I could tell. So how you surmount that, the difference in this particular instance is that the convening authority is not a coalition of the interested and willing, it's a county.
Mhm.
But that also raises questions particularly vexing for us. We're in two counties.
Yeah.
So if you come up with a policy that is relevant for all of the Eagle disciples, well, what do we do when we go to introduce that on the Pitkin side of our town?
Yeah.
I think on the broader scale of things, though, kind of look at it, it's climate change, it's a problem.
But
So it's in
again,
everybody's best interest.
Yeah.
no debate about that, but if it's a very specific intervention on construction standards, the implementation of
Yeah.
heat efficient or fuel efficient, whatever, then we can't have inconsistency across the town of Basalt.
This gets
And-
to another issue, Bill, that I think a lot of us, particularly you guys, would share, that, and particularly when it comes to climate, is we now support CORE as well, because we are looking through a lens of climate, but looking at it from a lot of other perspectives as well, is that, just like I said, when people don't live in political lines, this whole valley is one community. So, looking at this as a step to, an approach to a lot of things more regionally,
Oh,
to try to get past these
Totally with
statutory
you.
or just whatever the boundaries are. We think there's a lot more opportunity to be much more regional.
Okay, so
Debate.
it sounds like where we're going with this is Jeff is going to review this and we'll bring it back and talk about the MOU and then representation. And we will be communicating with you frequently and often.
Excellent. Well, thank you all.
Thanks,
I would-
Matt. Thanks for coming over. We appreciate it.
Yeah, great to
Good
see you. I will
seeing
say
ya.
one thing too, with Matt having been here, to say thanks to the town of Basalt. Minturn, of course, has a very similar gun range issue, and they're looking to engage the Keystone Center, I think. You guys had done that and thought that looked good.
Great.
Thanks for that guidance.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Oh, that's right.
now I don't feel bad for that box.
These are Eagle County pins? that we- There you go. Aha,
Homework.
documentos.
I love paper.
Documentos.
I just want to look at it. What is it called?
Thank you.
Are we allowed to
I'd
take
like
these?
to have one of these.
They were worth
Did you autograph them?
$3.
There you go.
Oh,
Thank Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Hawken, that guy's kind of above average smart, isn't he?
And Paul Hawken probably appreciates your large purchase.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for the books too, for the drawdown. That's fantastic.
Cheers, Matt, thank you.
All right, well then, thank you. That concludes 7B. We now move to the council action section of the agenda. Item 8A, presentation and resolution number 27, series of 2021. It's a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, repealing and replacing the town's salary schedule for employees. So Christie, and I'm going to make a wild guess here that Candy Johnson might be involved in this. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct,
Ah.
Mayor. Thank you. Very good guess. Yes, just to kick this off, we were initially looking at last year, in 2020, before COVID hit us, at a benefits and salary evaluation market study survey. And then we delayed the salary part of that because of COVID and a lot of the unknowns around the financial part of that and the impacts until now. And so we finished the benefit part of that last year and made some recommendations into our 2021 budget. So this is just now based on the salary changes and recommending a new salary schedule based on the market analysis that she just completed. And so she's going to present that information to you tonight. Okay. Candy?
Good evening, everyone. I am going to share my screen so that you can see
We're going
the
to have to turn the
presentation.
volume up.
We're going to try to turn you up a little bit too, Candy.
Okay.
And Candy, I learned something. You should really speak close to the mic that's in your laptop, even though your face will be pretty close to the screen. The closer you can get to the mic, the better.
Okay, well, I hope, can everyone hear me pretty well?
Much better.
Yes, that's
Great.
better, Candy.
Okay, well, thank you for asking me to present. In the packet, there is also a methodology report, which this presentation will pretty much mirror. I want to walk through this with you and share the process that I follow when working with any organization. It is always the same, but what's so important, and as Christy mentioned, is that we started this project back in 2020, and it was to not only look at updating the pay plan, but to do a benefit analysis. At that time, the objectives were established, which not only included that, but in looking at the pay plan, to consider how competitive the pay rates of Basalt are with the labor market, which I will explain in more detail. And to also ensure that the job descriptions were up to date and discuss not only the importance of recruiting quality employees, but also retaining them through the total compensation program. And it is a program that needs to be affordable, but also flexible, because organizations are always changing, so are jobs within them. And the pay practices need to be consistently applied across the organization, but with the process being the same, every plan is always different because it needs to be customized to the organization based on the vision, the values, the culture of the organization. So this slide is a listing of the steps, and it shows them in a sequence which we follow, although we find that we go forward, we go backwards, because it's really a matter of diving deep into each of these steps and to see how they fit together. So I'll walk through those in a little bit more detail. Besides knowing what the objectives are, it's important for me to learn about an organization, the history, what has been working, what hasn't, what are the overall desirable objectives in terms of attracting employees, retaining them. And that's where it's important to learn about what has been working or not. What are the difficulties in finding qualified talent? And the labor market is where organizations recruit from and where they lose employees to. So it can be geographic in nature, it can be by industry, and it's important to get a sense of that so that we can then pull survey data. as we go forward. As I mentioned, it's important for me to learn about any issues that are impacting the town. What do they not only need in terms of skill sets, but what do they value in terms of behaviors? And also, how does this fit within the total compensation program? And how will we customize it so that it fits with the values, which is this next slide. So looking at these principles, as well as the objectives, talking through what have been the issues, help establish a foundation for making decisions as we go forward. The total compensation model listed here, many of you may have seen before. It's just that, a model that gives you an idea of some of the elements, maybe not all, that employers offer in exchange for employees' contributions. The idea is that in the center of this, it still is a matter of an organization understanding not only what it wants to achieve, its strategy for getting there, but also how it wants to align or mix these different elements of total compensation, ultimately with the goal that it will achieve its results. So you can see there are a few things here. Certainly base pay refers to one's hourly rate or weekly salary, and that's the focus of this presentation. But earlier we did look at benefits, which is a very large bucket of paid time off, retirement plans, insurance plans, wellness programs, miscellaneous benefits such as tuition, reimbursement. And all employees are going to see each of these things differently based on their own lens of what their needs are and what their interests are. So certainly these, it's like puzzle pieces, they can change, they can mix and match. Very quickly, recognition is another element that many employers offer. It can be monetary or non-monetary, but certainly something that employees value. Work-life programs are those that help employees to manage and be successful in both personal and professional lives. And again, another area that is going to vary in terms of interest from the demographics of the workforce. Performance is something that has a bearing on increases in one's pay. So certainly tied to this is an increase based on whether somebody meets expectations or even exceeds. And then development and career opportunities can run from providing on-the-job skills to helping one develop a career through varying means to do that. So again, these things are pretty standard, but intangible and intangible elements also go into this model. So this is what we talk about to get us started in the process. And now I'll walk through the steps of updating the pay plan. Pay plans are, for the most part, job-based. So we start with that as our focus. And as one of the objectives listed earlier was to have up-to-date and accurate job descriptions. So we reviewed all of those. I look at them, and that is to try and match them with jobs in salary surveys. So when I review a job description, I'm looking at the duties performed and the qualifications required. I obviously look at the title, but I never match title to title because that will really vary. And what is also critical, since a job description won't necessarily capture everything about a job, is that I met back in 2020 with not only all the department heads, but with town manager and finance director together so that we could really drill down at this stage to learn more about the jobs and ensure that we had a pretty solid match. You'd see 70 to 80% match between the town of Basalt job with that of the survey job description. So when we talk about job matching, also known as market pricing, is this concept of external equity, very commonly used by most organizations to get a sense of how are we paying in comparison with other employers. And it's doing just that, looking at what do other companies, organizations pay. And so we're not going to be looking at an internal focus just yet, but we need to look at survey data to do this. And when we do that, and I will tell you, I have been showing this slide for years. I can't tell you how many years, because to me, it illustrates the point that survey data is not as precise or as accurate as it says here. The engineering data, if we were building a bridge with survey data, this is what we would have. But the point being is that we only know from surveys what employers say they're paying for jobs. We don't know why. We don't know what types of people are in those positions. So we have to approach survey data to know that we're going to be using reliable information, and that includes surveys that not only present their methodology, but they also verify the data that they receive from employers, and it needs to be timely in the sense of from date of collection to date of publication, and includes job descriptions that we can match to, and very importantly, looking at sample size. So when we talk about a survey, we're also considering that employers, to participate in the survey, they're going through the same process. They're looking at the survey description to try and match to it. And they are also advised or instructed to try and match as close as possible, like to a 70 to 80%. Then they provide their number of pay rates for the position they're matching to. And that's averaged, and that becomes part of the sample. If we have at least 30 sample rates in a sample, that is, then we can be fairly assured that we're going to have reliable indicator of what the market is paying for this position. That doesn't always happen, but these are the things that we want to look at and consider when we're pulling survey data as part of the process. Because again, survey data, this concept of external equity is just one stage of our process. So to tell you a little bit more about that, the surveys that we used are those from Employers Council, an organization that's been publishing survey data since the mid-1940s. And they publish surveys at the same time every year. The first survey I'll mention here is the 2020 Colorado Benchmark Survey. And this includes pay rates for those positions considered benchmark jobs that are found in large numbers in most organizations that we've all probably heard of. And that includes positions such as in accounting and finance, human resources, administrative positions, business support, engineering, and so forth. Public employers, that is governmental employers, as well as private employers, participate in this survey. Also, you notice the dates of 2020. That's because the 2021 survey data had not been published yet. So we looked at 2020 data, and the second survey is the public employer survey, which is going to include those positions that you find in towns, cities, counties, special districts, and ranging from those positions in public works, planning, community development, specific jobs only found in the public sector, and public safety, among others that are in the survey. Public employers participate in the survey, as well as some private utilities. The other thing you'll notice here is that we looked at all Colorado as the data line, meaning we looked at all employers in Colorado that provided data. Now, Employers Council does publish the surveys by different data lines, so you can look at Western Slope or you can look at resort area data lines, but very often the sample size is either so small or there wasn't enough of this participation to even publish the data. So we decided that we wanted to look at the size that would be much larger, and we looked at all Colorado. At the bottom of the slide, you see that data was aged to 1/1/21. Aging data is pretty common. It means that we're looking at data that's published at a point prior in time. In this case, both of these surveys came out in January of 2020, so they were effective in that month. And so given that pay rates are typically increasing, we looked at aging data to bring it forward to January 1st of 2021. And one of the reasons for doing this is that then we have a similar date for both surveys, since the dates did vary for collection, as well as we're looking at trying to keep pace with any market movement. When we age data, I always look at the employment cost index, because this measures the change in employer costs for compensation, similar to the consumer price index, which we've heard about recently because it's measuring the change in pricing. So the employment cost index comes out every quarter, published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we did discuss this because pre-COVID, employer costs in the public sector were increasing and then started to drop. So this 2.5% is a blend of both public and private sector employer change in cost of compensation. So that is what we did with the survey data. And again, we looked at sample size by number of organizations that had reported their pay rates, as well as total number of pay rates for every job and every job match. So this again is looking at how other employers are paying for similar positions. It's very important that we then also balance that by looking at internal equity, the concept where we're considering how do we value the jobs within our organization, within the town of Basalt. And one way of doing that, the way to do that, is to look at compensable factors that are inherent in all jobs. Three most common factors are noted here. How much knowledge does this job require? What decisions are truly made in this job? What is the impact of the accountability of this position? So if someone in the job makes a mistake, how easy is it to correct? How easy is it to find and then correct? What is the long-lasting impact, if any? And you can see that these all can run on the spectrum. But to balance the two concepts of looking at survey data and then also looking at how we value jobs internally, I look at all of the positions based on the survey data. And then we look at the jobs, not only with those compensable factors, but also considering such things as reporting relationships or job progression, certainly when you have levels in positions. Also considering the data and how it is presented relative to the size of the town, location of town, and other things that take us back to what we talked about earlier, critical skills, difficulty in hiring or retaining, and then also to compare to the current structure. There are often anomalies. One example would be where you might have a supervisory position and the data, for whatever reason, maybe a small sample size, is lower than jobs that report to the supervisory position. So not unusual to see anomalies. So once we look at that, we then review that we have the jobs that are grouped together in salary grades, which is the same structure that has existed for a number of years at the town. And we look at the grades in terms of not only the market data for the different positions, but also the similarity back to internal equity of the duties and qualifications of the positions that are in the same grade. All salary grades have a range, and a salary range is really where we are identifying how much we will pay for any job in a particular grade. The midpoint is the focus because we look at the average for each grade, the survey data, and that then is established as a midpoint initially, and then calculated from there are the minimum and the maximum, meaning that the minimum is the lowest rate you would hire anyone in position in that grade. The maximum is the most that you would pay for someone in that job. So again, the range gives you flexibility. Once we had the ranges updated, we also looked at geographic pay differentials. So this is yet another means of looking at how does pay vary across the state of Colorado, because we had looked at Colorado data to pull from the survey. So I look at the Economic Research Institute Geographic Assessor, and I started by looking at pay rates of 50,000 up to 75,000. And for those pay rates, the town of Basalt, or excuse me, not the town, but Basalt, geographic area of Basalt, tends to pay about 5.1% higher than the rest of Colorado. Probably not a surprise either that the Metro Denver area is about the same percentage higher than the rest of Colorado, maybe even a tad more. Now, this is looking at pay, not cost of living. So then we decided that we would apply this 5.1% increase to the market data for the first 3 grades of the structure, which are 60, 70, and 80. The other thing is that we looked at comparing the proposed ranges based on market data to the current ranges, or those that have been in place for a number of years. And also when looking at this, we don't want to just zoom forward with ranges that are going to perhaps necessitate a 10 to 15% increase in ranges. I wanted to keep any increase to range no more than 5% above current. So again, to try and look at cost control there. And another thing also that we had discussed was that the police officer 1 and police officer 2 levels are very different positions, but were in the same grade, or they have been for some time, with no distinction. But yet there clearly is a process for moving from a police officer 1 to a police officer 2, requiring criteria to be met, experience as well as performance before moving from a 1 to a level 2. So we kept the positions in the same grade, but we identified that the minimum pay for a police officer 2 would actually be at the first quartile, or halfway between the minimum and midpoint of that range. And that is also to minimize any pay compression among the officers. The other thing, when we look at structure, this is where we finally shift our focus from looking at how jobs are paid to how are employees paid within the range. Do we have anyone paid below the minimum? Do we have people who are too low in the range, based on, again, that consistency of pay practice that's important to have, which is considering not only experience, performance, and others that are important to the town of Basalt. So from here, I'll show you, and I believe this is in the packet, that you see broken out in different slides, starting with grade 60. In green, highlighted in green, is the range that has been in place, starting at a minimum of 43,021. And you can see that the proposed range for grade 60 is starting at 43,800. And the midpoints of ranges are listed in, or highlighted in bold. So this shows us grade 60, 70, and 80. And then grade 90, 100, and 110. And then grades 120 through 140.
Okay.
That's the last
Is
slide.
that, yeah, is that the finale?
That's it.
Is there a question?
Candy, thank you. It's an uncommonly thorough kind of process. It seems really well thought out, well researched. We did like the bridge analogy. We have some bridges that look like that in the country these days, unfortunately. So I think at this point, Christy, unless you will take questions from council, But then I will swiftly ask for a motion to approve the resolution that's before us tonight here.
Yeah, Mayor, I just note one thing is just note on this last slide, the projected costs that we'll bring forth in a supplemental budget in the future.
Okay, great. I think that will be given fair consideration. Bill?
I got a bunch of questions. I had one on the proposed structure compared to current structure. I didn't fully understand, Candy, the grade, if I understand correctly, is an index that you comprised based upon authority, number of reports, fiscal, authority and job, authority to make decisions, authority to commit resources, number of reports. Is that a constructed grade, or where does that come from? And how do we shake out in that grade structure? How many staff do we have in each grade?
And I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you. I can hear Christie better for some reason, so I don't know if, I know you were asking about the grades.
Right, what do the grades correspond to? How did you come up with the grades?
Salary grade.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have salary grade 120, salary grade 130?
No, I appreciate your question.
Oh.
I'm just clarifying, that's what the question is.
Yeah.
Let me go back to, so salary grade, so, and even when we were, for every single job, we have an average from the survey, depending upon the job match. So we may have 2 positions that are in a grade. We may have more than that because we've talked through it in terms of not only the market data that is fairly close, as well as a review of the aspects of the position, such as the compensable factors or reporting, supervisory responsibility, et cetera. So the average of the survey data for the jobs in a grade, that is then going to be the focus to develop the midpoint of a range. And I believe that in the packet, or maybe not, but there is a position listing that shows every job that is in a particular grade. So we have those jobs in grade 60, and then we have only one job in the very top grade, and that is the position of town manager.
And the
So does that
grades,
help?
and the grades are an index of public and private sector wages?
The survey data, depending on the job, match. So for an example, when we have a job that is an accounting type position, the survey data we looked at includes both public sector and private sector organization, because that's a benchmark job found in both of those sectors. But then for a position of police officer, that's only going to come from public sector employers, because that's who employs police.
Okay. Candy, just for curiosity's sake, have we ever looked at aggregate data that would look at performance at a macro level, say our aggregate payroll to our budget as compared to other municipalities or other public sector institutions, or aggregate payroll to population, or aggregate payroll to geographic area, although I tend to think that would be pretty meaningless. But how do we know how efficiently we're deploying our human resources as a function of the amount that our payroll is?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear all of that. I'm so sorry.
Do you ever look at the total payroll to budget as a measure of performance efficiency, or
No.
payroll to population for municipal governments?
Well, on that note, I will tell you that some organizations, when we look at survey data, they will also want to consider the data relative to similar size of town or city, for example. And yet I don't see a correlation that a larger organization would pay more than a smaller. That takes us back to philosophy, for example. And then also, so often we find that by doing so, we're still going to have a very small sample size. And that's not going to give us good information to build a structure.
you know, Bill, I might be able to help explain that too. As part of our budgeting process, that really determines like what types of services that this organization is going to put into play. For example, some towns and municipal governments might have a recreation facility that's more heavily intensive on payroll types of activities. Whereas other times we're going to have more capital related items like on our CIP. So I think it does vary based upon the services provided in each organization.
For sure.
Yeah.
So you need to evaluate these things in a more comprehensive way,
Yeah.
but they're still meaningful.
Yeah,
Federal
sure,
government agencies compare themselves to one another, and they have wildly different budgets. The
Yes.
Pentagon has a huge staff and they have a huge budget, but in measure of efficiency, you can still look at resources deployed per employee. And it's more or less meaningful depending upon the case. But I'm just curious where we shake out, because I frankly tend to think that we do an awful lot with very little. And I have argued in the past that we should be hiring more people. So I'm curious if there is any data that would support that hypothesis.
Yeah. Yeah, we might be able to look at that as part of our budget process for next year, for sure.
But I would think CML would be a good place to look at that, to see what, you know, towns, they aggregate them by towns less than 5,000, towns less than
Yeah.
10,000. What percent of
I don't
budget
think
is
they do.
labor? What percentage is?
And they don't, because it's really going back to the job match. And so you look at how close is that job based on the duties and qualifications of the job, not the title. And then some organizations, they may have a job. In fact, I'll give you an example, economic development specialist. There is a survey description in Employers Council survey.
Yeah, I think CML.
And yet I know
normalizes
that most organizations have that job, but quite a few have a higher level. And if they don't have that 70 to 80% match, they're not going to provide the data, even though they've participated in the survey itself. So sometimes we find that the organization has also provided some survey data, but not for all of their positions, because the crux of the matter is that they have to have a job match to begin with. And to your point on the recreation,
I've got to do my job here. We're an hour and 10 minutes behind schedule, and you know, these are some, and I totally sympathize with the interest in overall sort of economics for the town budget, which, Christie, I think it would be fun to look at other communities and how we stack up. But I got to draw our attention to the business at hand, which is the resolution number 27, series of 2021. And I'd like to call our attention and get some discussion on that. And if there isn't, then get to a motion. Just doing my job, sorry.
No,
We're running
No, I
behind
mean,
here.
the comment I would have is I think at the end of the day, we're looking at a $78,000 increase this year. I think the town staff has done a great job. Everybody in the entire staff for the entire town. It's been a rough year. I think they deserve it. It is gonna add some costs in the future, but to retain good staff, I think this is necessary. So does anybody else have anything? I'll make the motion if you don't.
I'm just not sure I understand the retroactive part of it.
The reason we made it retroactive was because at the beginning of the year, when we got into the budget discussions, what we said was we wanted to see how the revenues were going to shake out on kind of year 2 of COVID, and that we would reconsider it at mid-year, kind of with that idea of not necessarily punishing the employees who have, you know, stayed and done that hard work for us, and just thought that was a fair consideration, since it was something we did realize we can afford it. The budget numbers are coming in strong and not being adversely affected by COVID. So that was the idea.
Gotcha.
And just to clarify, that's 77,000 total for this year.
That's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Divided by everybody. I'll second.
Okay, we have
Yeah, here, I'll make the, Mayor, I move the town council.
I thought you were already motioned.
Resolution number
The second's
27,
in place.
series of 2021 as presented.
Third.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Pam, would you please call the roll for this resolution, or?
Happily. Thank you, and that was Glenn Drummond and Bill Infante, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's begin with Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill Kane.
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you, Bill Infante.
Sure.
Thank you, Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
And Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Thank you, motion carries.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Candy. That's, I think we learned a lot about compensations. It's not a simple process. So thank you for the education, Christie. So we will move on.
Mayor, I move the town council convene as the local liquor licensing authority.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All voice vote? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, we are now,
Thank you. May I
we're
have
now
Ryan?
kind of liquored up here.
Honey,
So
His assistant, if
we're
she'd
the
like to
liquor
join
license
you.
authority, so,
Either place.
Either
Yeah,
place.
is Niala gonna join you?
yeah, the
Yeah,
the
come on
order
up.
of
Sit through
business.
it all.
She looks awfully underage to be talking, addressing a liquor license.
Protecting the next generation.
The next order of business is a public hearing on a change of location. So this is to call liquor license from 360 Market Street, the temporary, to 400 Robinson Street, the contemporary, within the town of Basalt, Colorado. So Pam, this is actually your item, so why don't you
This is my
get
item.
us through this?
Thank you. So this is an application for the moving of the transfer of a location permit of the arts liquor license for Takah from 360 Market Street to 400 Robinson Street, pretty much within the same neighborhood, just a couple blocks away. The reason for the location change is a move to their new home and permanent location of Takah. And the property has been posted and notice has been published for a public hearing regarding this item, which is required by state law. Numerous comments were received from our investigating agencies, particularly the planning department, which put a lot of thought into the move and the future use of the interior and exterior spaces of Takah. Their comments concern outdoor containment, signage, sound, any tents that might go outside and their inspection and approval, and also their interior events concerning vendors, food vendors, and that sort of thing. They're all listed in here. I could go through each one, but they are listed out in the packet. One important note is that minimum changes to any of those conditions set forth by the planning department can be approved, may be approved by the planning director. The police department supports the change in location. Roaring Fork Fire Rescue had no problems with the change in location. Eagle County Environmental Health has reviewed the plans and they have no concerns about the change in location. The town clerk did recommend that the change in location be conditioned on the executive director, event managers, and servers obtaining some form of educational liquor seminar training so that everyone is on the same page when it comes to liquor service, checking IDs, being able to identify intoxicated individuals, that sort of thing.
Okay.
The town does accept those classes for 4 years. So they would have to be renewed from time to time. Of course, no license will be issued until a certificate of occupancy has been issued by the building department. The local liquor authority is required to make a report, and that report can be based on these findings from staff, that the property to be licensed is in possession of the applicant. It is not located within any school, public principal campus of any college, university, or seminary. The applicant has submitted copies of a petition that does indicate the neighborhood desire and need for this transfer. There are no additional arts licenses within the vicinity of the Takah license or other arts licenses within the town of Basalt. The only other one is held by the Basalt Regional Library. That just goes to show that we don't have a huge concentration of this type of license in the same area. And as of the writing of this memo, I have received no phone calls, emails, written comments in any way in opposition to this change of location. So staff, after any comments by the applicant, would make a recommendation to find for, in favor of the change of location, and a suggested motion is listed
Okay.
on the memo.
Ryan, do you care to address the council, or do you
I
rest
just
your,
wanna
you
thank
rest your
staff.
case, or?
I just want to thank the staff for their hard work on this. Pam's been great, everyone's been great, I'm glad you approved. The last item, because from my point of view, they deserve it greatly, so we're thrilled to work with the town to make sure we get it right, we do it right, and keep our community safe but entertained.
Great. Thank you, Ryan.
And Mayor,
Questions of,
I'm sorry, I would make one more comment too. We did decide to move ahead with some special event liquor permits for the first few events in July, only because we're not sure that the state will process this in time for their first.
Hedging our bets.
good point.
We're just
Okay.
hedging our bets, exactly.
That's the, what,
So-
July 22nd, or whatever date?
July 10th will be our first show
Okay.
outside, so every Saturday starting July 10th, we'll be
Great.
programming outside, and yeah, fun begins.
And maybe just a clarification, Pam, that we set it up that if for some reason they didn't get a CO, they could have the events totally outside with porta potties.
That's one of those planning department, yes, comments. Thoughtfully made. Thank you, Susan.
Gary?
Sure. My only question is why do we have a 9 PM closure
For outdoor.
for outdoor? But why even 9 o'clock for
That's when
outdoor?
you start getting warmed up at 9 o'clock.
It's just a question, because we've had so many questions about it downtown too, is I thought we moved it to 10 downtown, so.
It's 10 for special events.
Well, the application itself came in for originally 9:30 with amplified music stopping at 9. And it was really, I think it came out of some discussions with administration and TCA that we didn't want to get the neighbors upset right away.
We're gonna wait for that.
I was like, honestly, if you.
Gary, our acts this summer are starting at 7 PM. The artists are slated to do 90-minute sets.
Okay.
Certainly, you know me, if the party's going great, I don't want to shut it down, but I also want to be respectful of our neighbors. We think that 9 o'clock time gives us the time that we need, and we also have a mechanism in there. If we need to go later, we can come talk to Ryan and ask for a one-time variance for that. So we're okay with it for the moment. If we find that this summer, the Saturday concert series want to start later, next summer we can revisit this, but I think, for what we need for this summer, this is totally adequate.
My only issue with that is, once you do it to 9, it's gonna be very hard to move it up.
I'm all for 10, if you guys want to go to 10.
10.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just a question for council, because we've had this in downtown, the discussions about, we want Vitality. Do we want to shut Vitality off at 9 o'clock
Right.
outside? I'm in favor of letting it go further. I don't want to go to midnight, but 10 to me was totally reasonable, but that's, I just wanted to put it out to everybody else.
Can that be offered with an amendment?
What?
Can that be offered with an amendment
Of
when
course,
we're
we
the
can-
liquor authority?
Sure, we are the liquor authority.
Who wants to make it?
Well, I'll make it if ever, I just want to see.
It is a public hearing.
Yeah.
We do
Yes.
have to open it to. a
No,
public
no,
hearing.
yeah, but I'll make it, I'll make the amendment in the approval, but I want to, before that, I want to
Is
see.
that an amendment specific to TCA or an amendment?
Yeah, because this is only
Okay.
the one we're reviewing.
Gotcha.
But are we
So-
getting crosswise with the notice? The resolution said 9.
Well, it's, it's subject to amendment by town council, some of
Okay.
those conditions is within the
I like
general
it.
subject
Love it.
matter.
It's perfect.
So unless the applicant protests,
I think they can,
He doth not protest.
I think if both parties are in agreement, then it's not a problem.
Okay, Gary, you want to make that motion?
go for it.
Well, we have
Public
to
hearing.
have a public hearing first.
We just talked about this. This is a public hearing. We open it up to the public.
That Bill does
8:01
that.
PM.
Well, he's not.
Okay. Are there comments from the public regarding our application for change of location for liquor license for TCA?
And just to note that we haven't had any notice before the meeting that anybody wanted to speak on the item. If they do, why don't they text 970-379-1514, and I'll look at my phone, but I don't think anybody really has identified that they wanted to speak. And no one in the audience is here for that item.
And no one is in the Zoom
Yeah.
section, waiting to speak, or indicating they want to
Okay,
speak. So-
so having no comment, I will close the public hearing.
Mayor, I move that
That-
the town council approve the change of location of the Arts liquor license for the Arts Campus at Willits from 360 Market Street to 400 Robinson within the town of Basalt, Colorado, contingent on the applicant meeting conditions as stated in the staff memo presented this evening, with the amendment that outdoor events can go with amplified music and serving alcohol to 10 o'clock.
Right, and that means, just for clarification, item number 3 would mean that amplification and the serving of liquor stops at 10. It
Right.
means the site, people can still be there, and they have to leave by 11. And the people that are there taking down the music equipment have all the time they need to take the equipment down, but they just should be quiet.
Yes.
That's
Can-
what that means.
May I ask one question?
Uh-huh.
Can we ask Chief Knott if he's comfortable with this?
Chief, good evening. Did you hear the question?
You know, everybody, I'm sorry, you're really hard to hear being away from the mics. Are we discussing going until 10 PM or 10:30?
Yeah, we're talking about allowing the serving of liquor to go from 9 o'clock to 10 PM. And that would also include amplified music up until 10 o'clock, and then everybody
Mike?
have to vacate the premises by 11.
He can't hear you.
Closer.
No, the PD's fine with that. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would be happy to second.
Okay, been moved and seconded as amended. So Pam, I think we better call the roll on this one.
Okay, happy to. Elise Huddle,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Bill Infante,
Yes.
and Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, ready? Mayor, I move the town council adjourn the local liquor licensing authority and reconvene the town council.
Second.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Could I propose that we move item 8H to the next? We just have some folks waiting in the audience. That was the last item.
Okay.
So moved.
Easement relocation.
And a council person can make a quick motion to amend the agenda to take item 8H next. I would make the motion to move item 8H next for the lovely people in the audience.
But did we formally
Second.
come out as a liquor licensing authority?
Yes, Ryan Slack made the
Okay,
motion, yeah.
so then we will take up item 8H, resolution number 29, series of 2021.
Bill,
If we-
he made a motion, I seconded it, you gotta call it?
Ah.
We gotta amend the agenda.
Yes.
We gotta
On
amend
the
it.
motion to come out as a liquor
No,
licensing authority?
To amend the agenda.
Oh, to change the agenda, okay, got it. So voice vote on
Votes,
that.
votes.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a reason you're mayor pro tem. Yeah, get comfortable with this.
No.
See this little tool?
I see, you're a mayor, you can use it. We gave you 15 less months to use it, so.
So the next order of business, we are going to take up item 8H, resolution number 29, series of 2021, a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving an easement relocation agreement. Ryan and Jeff.
You want to go ahead and take it, Jeff?
Sure. So, here with us are the applicants, Chris Suki and his attorney, Anne Marie McPhee. I'll introduce this item and then let them make a few comments. I'll try to be fairly concise. The River's Edge Meadows subdivision in the town, which is basically Riverside Drive, on the plat, it depicts an easement for the frying pan ditch. And that ditch historically carried irrigation water prior to that part of town being developed. That ditch runs through a number of lots in that subdivision, including Lot 18, which the applicant now owns. On Lot 18, it runs kind of right through the developable portion of the lot, whereas on some of all of the other lots, I think, in Riverside Meadows, it runs through the rear of the lots, or otherwise not in an area where it would encumber development. In 1990, the town dried up all of its interest that it had in the frying pan ditch, and those water rights were then decreed as part of the town's augmentation plan. And so since that time, there's been this dried up ditch, and many of the lot owners have filled that in. And what the applicant has come to the town to propose is we discussed an agreement where they too would like to fill in the ditch and allow for it to be moved so that Lot 18 could be developed. So what's in front of you is proposed an amendment to or I guess it's an easement relocation agreement, which would do two things. One, it would allow for the frying pan ditch to be filled in on Lot 18 in the developable area, and then grant the town or any other party that might have an interest in this ditch that's been dried up for 30 years, that in the event it needs to be reestablished, you can do that just on a kind of along the side of the property.
Got it.
So with that introduction, I'll see if the applicants have anything else to add here.
Good evening. Would you folks like to address council or add anything to that, or what do you?
I think Jeff summarized it pretty well, that it's just
Okay.
trying to make the best use of the property, and if there ever is a need, that the ditch can be reestablished along the side of the property, you know, and if any work won't impede the flow of the ditch, but in the meantime, he can landscape it, you know,
Yeah.
and if the time comes, then
Sure.
we work with the town.
Okay. Any questions of council? All right. I would entertain a motion. There's no public hearing required here, so we can take this up. I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 29, series of 2021.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 29, series of 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam?
All right, let's begin with Bill Kane,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Bill Infante,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay.
You waited all
Thank
that time.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
Thank you.
The wait was longer than the actual item.
Thank you for amending the
Not
agenda.
unusual.
Thanks.
So I think that takes us back to, we gotta rewind here.
Yeah, 8C.
8C, so we are back to item 8C. I think I can keep going here. Item 8C, this is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 7, series of 2021, ordinance of the Town Council, Town of Basalt, Colorado, granting site plan approval, amendment to the final development plan, and amendment to final subdivision plat for the development of Basalt Public Works Facility on Lot 4 of the Mid-Valley Center PUD, Basalt, Colorado. Catherine, you're on. Good to see you.
Yeah,
Welcome.
good to see you all. Good to see you again. I'll make this quick. As you all are aware, the purpose of the application was to permit the development of the new public works facility at Lot 4 of the Mid-Valley PUD. We received positive feedback, as you all heard at first reading, from the neighboring property owners. We reached out to all of them. And just to orient you again, the law is outlined in red on the presentation we have here. Umbrella roofing is just to the east or to the right as you're looking. Thanks, James. And then just northwest of the property is the medical facility, and then next to that is TAC Fitness. The hope is to develop the lot in 3 phases. The first phase would include improvements to the access. We've already obtained an access permit from CDOT. And can move forward once we have the approvals in place. It will include new utility connections to the Mid-Valley Metro District, both water and sewer, and also a new pole barn, the relocation of the existing trailer or office that was located on site, some new storage bays, and then also improvements to a landscaping band that will be between the new access and the lot. Phase 2 will include a new garage space that will be for the town facilities. It can be up to 4,000 square feet and with additional office space above. At that point, we would demolish that existing trailer and office, and the new storage base would be, some additional storage base would be relocated. in the drawing you're seeing here, the blue is that new garage space. And at this point, in the phasing, the lot would become the base of operations for the Public Works Department. And then in phase 3, this would only occur if Widget Street were to be extended, and we'd still need to work through a number of details to make that happen, but that would be part of a third phase. The council approved this plan at first reading earlier this month. No changes have been made to the ordinance since that time. And I do have a schedule with me, a proposed schedule, should you all choose to approve the plan today. The plan would be for the plans to go out to bid July 8th. We would be back in front of you hopefully August 10th for a bid approval. After that, we could get the notice to proceed plans to CDOT, which would be a first step, and then construction could potentially start as early as August 16th. There would be about 4 to 5 weeks of civil work construction, and then the structure would potentially take a little bit more time, but that is the general outline of the plan. And I'm open for any questions you all have or additions or amendments to the ordinance if you have any.
Questions for Catherine regarding the site plan for Lot 4? Public hearing.
It's a public hearing, so if you could
So
open
we
the
will
public hearing and
Open the public hearing at 8:12, and Susan Philp will explain rules for calling in, should anyone want to do that.
Sure. We haven't had anyone notify us that they would like to speak, but if you could text me at 970-379-1514, and then we'll make sure that you can get on. But we have no one in the queue and no one emailed Town Hall indicating that they wanted to speak. So
Okay.
if we could go.
So the phone is not lit up. I would, if there are no further questions, I would entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 7, series of 2021 on second reading.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 7, series of 2021 on second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Okay, let's begin with Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Elise Huddle,
Yes.
Bill Infante,
I am going to remain consistent and abstain.
abstain, thank you, sir. Ryan Slack,
Yes.
thank you, Bill Kane,
Yes.
and Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1. Abstention, excuse me, 1 abstention.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
We will now turn to item 8D. This is also a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 8, series of 2021. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, amending the municipal code to repeal Chapter 11, Article 8, Skateboard Park, and adopt a new Chapter 11, Article 8, Use of Town Parks and Other Town Property, adopting rules for certain town park and amending the penalty and fee schedule. Jeff and Susan?
Thanks. I will provide a brief introduction and overview of this ordinance again, and then kick it over to Susan for more details. But as was introduced on first reading, this ordinance gets at how do we regulate our parks. And in some cases, we have rules that we think and regulations that should apply to all parks, but then with other parks and town properties, the ability to adopt more site-specific rules. And so this ordinance does 3 things. 1, it amends the code to lay out provisions in the code that would apply to all parks. Number 2, it creates a mechanism and procedure for promulgating those park-specific rules, and those are really from a staff level and then would come before town council for approval in an ordinance. And then third, this ordinance also adopts some of those specific rules, in particular for the skateboard park, which those rules currently exist in the town code, also for the Cypress Meadows Lake and for the rugby field. And I don't recall there being many questions that we needed to follow up on for second reading, but with that, I'll turn it over to you, Susan.
No, we haven't made any changes to the ordinance since the first reading. If you remember, this is part of an effort to make it easier to enforce rules on our parks. And second, is part of an effort for our community members to know and be aware of what our rules are, and to make it, quite frankly, more defensible. And so I think Jeff kind of outlined the rules, and previously, the only reference to park rules was some rules on camping that were in Chapter 7. The skateboard was called out specifically and had very outdated rules, and there were some rules on camping, and so this kind of sets a mechanism that we can adopt additional rules or clarifications in the future.
Okay, great. As I recall, we did query the chief about the rules and enforceability, and do you want to add anything for second reading here, Chief Knott, or are we good to go?
Chief, anything to add?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Can I ask him a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
The one question I had was, Chief, if you can hear me, and Susan, is just the helmet thing for the skateboard park. I don't know if you discussed it, I wasn't here for first reading, so I just wanted to kind of see what that was. Strongly encouraged is not a regulation.
Do you want to start with that, Greg, and then I'll pick up?
Yeah, so we don't require helmet usage anywhere else in town. The skate park, it creates an adversarial contact when we're going there to speak with people about wearing them. So that's why we're looking for a recommendation to wear a helmet if people choose to, and using it at their own risk, since we don't do it anywhere else in town, and enforce that.
And even for kids? Even for kids?
Even for kids, yeah, we believe that, you know, that's a choice of the family, the parents, to make that choice.
Okay. Any further questions? Any additional questions? So this is a public hearing.
So you want to open the public hearing?
Yeah, let's open the public hearing, and then we'll see if you want to go through the full. Okay.
Yep, so we opened the public hearing at 8:18, and we have no one in the queue. No one emailed townhall@basalt.net that they were having trouble getting in, and I think probably someone heard me earlier say that if you wanted to speak, text 970-379-1514.
Or access the meeting via.
Or you can access the meeting through the agenda, the first page of the agenda with the link.
Okay, hearing no comment, any final comment by council? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 8, series of 2021 on second reading.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 8, series of 2021 on second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Elise Huddle,
Yes.
Bill Infante,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond,
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you. We move on to item AD, public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 9, series of 2021. This is an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, creating a special fund account related to ownership of units at Riverside Plaza Lot, BC. Christie.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This is the second reading. We talked about this the last time, that this was an audit recommendation for transparency and clarity in our financial reports, that we separate the HOA and create a new fund, and that also has to do with our GFOA award we're hoping to get for our audit. So.
Thank you. Questions of Christie from council? Susan, we will open the public hearing, so please notify public how they may call in.
Sure. The first page of the agenda that's online on the Agenda Center there's a link to access us through Zoom, or you can text me at 970-379-1514, and we'll put you on. We haven't had any member of the public indicate that they would like to join us either in the queue or through townhall@basalt.net, correct, Pam?
Correct.
Okay, so I think,
Just a question, we opened it at 8:22. Do we need to make sure we announce that? Or
It's fine, it's on,
Okay.
it's being
That's it,
recorded,
one time.
yeah.
No, you didn't say that. Sorry.
Well, I just want to say, Susan, can we add your thing that you're saying to that
Sure.
screen? Not, obviously not right now,
Have
but
to
for the
read it
next
every time.
meeting.
yeah, and I was actually thinking that maybe at the beginning of the public hearing, I mean, when you read the title, then I'm gonna tell people how to get on
That's a
so
good
that we
idea.
can kind of save
So we
some
don't have to
time.
wait.
Yeah,
That's a great idea. Okay.
And give them time to access,
yeah.
too.
yeah.
So, okay, so I think we've allowed adequate time, so I will close the public hearing
Yeah.
and ask for a motion.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 9, series of 2021 on second reading.
Second.
Pam?
Okay, let's begin with Bill Kane.
Yes.
Thank you. Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Bill Infante.
Yes.
And Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We move to item 8F. This is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 10, series of 2021. An ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, adopting amendments to livability requirements for community housing units in the Basalt Community Housing Guidelines. So this was approved on first reading. This is our second reading. It's a public hearing. So maybe, Susan, this is where we would ask people to, if they want to
Sure, this
comment
one
on-
isn't a public hearing, but we did have Kathy Click on here earlier.
It is a
Is she-
public hearing.
It is
Oh,
a
it is
public
public,
hearing.
Yeah, it's
sorry,
public
I'm
hearing,
sorry.
second reading.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong item. Yes, so if folks want to join the public hearing, the first page of your agenda online has a link that says zoom.us, and you can hit that link. Or you can call 346-248-7799. That's up on the screen. And the webinar ID is 920-7291, 4366. And if you're having trouble getting in, you can text me at 970-379-1514.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, James.
Thanks. This is a public hearing and second reading of an ordinance that would approve of amendments to the livability guidelines in the town's community housing guidelines that are proposed by the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, which is BAC. As was discussed at first reading, just as a little bit of background, in 2015, BAC developed minimum livability guidelines for affordable housing units. And they were included in the town's community housing guidelines. And it was on BAC's work program for this year to update those guidelines. So with help of staff and input from property managers of some of the various affordable housing complexes that we have in town, including Roaring Fork Apartments and Willits 7 affordable housing units, BAC has proposed the amendments to the livability guidelines that you have in the draft ordinance that are included in the packet. As was introduced at the last meeting, the proposed amendments include allowing for smaller appliances in the smaller affordable housing units for space efficiency. They also require double-layered honeycomb blinds, which is an energy efficiency improvement that was recommended by the Town of Basalt Green Team. And then there are also proposed minimum storage requirements for each of the units. As we discussed last time, the current guidelines basically have subjective standards that say storage in the amount approved by the town, and so that this would amend that. And then the other substantial change would be that the amendments would change the entity that makes the recommendation on waiver requests on individual projects from aspects of these guidelines, from the Special Housing Evaluation Committee, which is a entity primarily made up of staff and 2 BAC members. and it would change it to the Bach committee themselves. They thought that they would be in a better position to make a recommendation on waivers to council. So staff hasn't made any changes to the ordinance since first reading. Council adopted the ordinance on first reading. We did have Kathy Click and Doug McDonald were on the Zoom, but I think they dropped off earlier due to the delay in timing. So staff would recommend taking any public comments in the public hearing and providing council discussion.
Thanks, James. Susan, have we heard any from?
No, I don't have
Okay.
any notification, and Pam, you don't either, right?
That's correct.
All right. Ryan?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Before or at some point, just let's make sure we do open the public hearing just to meet that procedural requirement.
Okay, I thought we did that when Susan announced the,
I think that was just the
So at this point, we will open the public hearing. We've already provided guidance for how to call in, so, Ryan, do you have a question? We'll wait here a minute.
Yeah, just my only question would be on the 50 feet storage unit required on the first floor.
Yeah.
What if they put it in the basement? Like, I just feel like just telling someone, like, if you had a 10-unit thing, that means 500 feet of the first floor is now going to be storage, when that could be ADA accessibility units, or.
Sure.
I just wonder if that just, it's such a specific thing. I know Elise had brought it up too, and that's the only thing on this that I've been thinking about, that you're really holding this one thing on storage units having to be on the first floor.
Well, I mean, council could certainly amend that. I think Bach's thinking was that that's something for developments to shoot for, but that there could be considerable waiver situations considered on a project-by-project basis to that.
We're just making more bureaucracy by doing that.
Well, most of them you're gonna see, so Bach would be, I think almost all of them you would see. So the procedure is on all of these, you know, we're bringing them to Bach on affordable housing units and having them make their recommendation. So they would be making their recommendation to the town council at the meeting, so there really wouldn't be any additional bureaucracy. In fact, they're getting rid of it, because before it would have been the Bach, this other Scheck group that would have looked at it.
Yeah, and, you know, we already have a couple projects that would have to request waivers that are in, one that had a sketch approval, and then one that's in the queue right now for development review that doesn't have them on the first floor. So they're requesting waivers as part of their project, if council approved the ordinance as it is tonight.
And where are they suggesting the storage be located if not on the first floor?
On one of the projects, in fact, on both of the projects, it's on the floor in which the units are proposed, so those are upper floors.
And the object was just not to drag toys up the steps.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it gets down to.
Sure. But it could be for consideration if council's having heartburn on that.
Okay, I think we've allowed adequate time for public comments, so with that,
What is Ryan's suggestion?
I don't have a suggestion. It was more of a question if anyone else thought that was kind of, to say it has to be on the first floor to me just means we're gonna have all these waivers if they don't wanna put it on the first floor. I just feel like there's multiple floors on these buildings. Why regulate it just to the first floor? Because we think that's the best for someone.
I agree.
I guess is my.
So the only question I have on that is there anything else in here that requires at least 50 square feet, or is this the requirement and putting it on the first floor?
This is a requirement.
Because
and
I like the requirement to have storage space, because I really believe that all these units need to have it.
it's in the yard.
So I would like to keep that piece of it, if we could.
Yeah, no, I'm not against the storage. I'm just against
the first floor.
specifying on the first floor
Oh,
because
okay.
I feel like,
No,
Yeah,
what if they were able to put it all in the basement?
Right.
And then they had, and now you have multiple apartments on the first floor, or what is?
Well, it just dawns on me from our own apartment in New York. I mean, we have collective storage. Each unit has a certain amount of storage, but it's in one big room. The suggestion that I'm hearing is every apartment would have a special door that said James Lind, and James Lind would have his 50 square feet that he could lock.
Right.
Well, why do we want to bind design to that standard if you can have a collective storage space, as is definitely common in a lot of other places?
And I would say, you know, the first floor requirement, you know, Bach had a lot of discussion about it and was somewhat split, but decided to leave it in, so if that helps as well.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a way to craft it, though. If you take out the first floor, are you just gonna get their normal closets? Is there,
Well, the way it would read is storage space exterior to a dwelling unit that is at least 50 square feet.
Okay,
if
then
you
that works.
limited it that
Yeah.
way.
You okay?
Yeah, I would be happy if we made the, Mayor, I move the town council adopt ordinance number 10, series of 2021 as amended, removing just first floor from line 8, or number 8.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam?
I'm sorry, who made a second on that? I'm sorry.
Elise.
Elise, thank you.
Elise, yeah.
Thought I
Couldn't you
heard
tell by my croak?
Thank you. Okay, let's begin with Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Infante,
Yep.
Gary Tenenbaum,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
and Elise Huddle.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great, thank you. And last but not least is resolution number 28, series of 2021. This is a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving an agreement for professional services with Phil Vaughn Construction Management, Inc., Ryan and Christie.
Sure, I'll kick this off. And Phil, do you want to come up and?
Phil, I'm sorry we had you sit out there all night. We thought you were the new Aspen Times guy, but
Definitely not that guy, thank you. You just want to hear it all. You want to take it all in.
now, are you still interested in this? You saw the sausage being made here all night, so now you know what you're getting into.
That Scott Condon left?
No.
It's gonna be in the paper
Scott's
tomorrow.
watching. Scott is always watching. Hi, Scott.
So, yeah, thank you, and I think perhaps there was a little benefit in Phil's patience, because you hopefully will be seeing a lot more of the council in the future. Basically, what we are recommending as staff as we move through this Basalt Forward 2030, we have a number of projects that have been identified, and as we discussed earlier, have a survey out, and should we move forward with a ballot question and it's ultimately successful, there's a few things. Having fairly accurate costs on the projects is important for us so that we can follow through and actually build them, which is required if in fact that ballot question is approved. And then secondly, being able to manage those projects over time. But initially, this contract contemplates, between now and the end of the year, really focusing on the costs. And Phil has extensive experience in the valley and can help us with that, better understanding of what things are going to cost here locally, so that we can be accurate with that and really understand that up front, so that as you all wrestle with the idea of forwarding a ballot question, that you can do so with greater confidence. So with that, Christie, anything for you to add on that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is we went through an RFP process and interviewed 2 different candidates. Then we had an interview committee with the planning team and Public Works and myself and Ryan. And, Phil did a great job with all the questions we peppered him with. And we're really excited to have him on board. So.
Great. I think if you wouldn't mind, it'd be pretty instructive for council just to get a quickie overview of some of Phil's project work. I think he survived the Castle Creek Bridge remodel in Aspen. There's some things, I think it's be pretty instructive for the council to hear about some of these work experiences, which are It's amazing he's still alive from what I saw on the list there.
And if it's okay with you, I'll have Phil describe some of those.
Yeah, that's what I was
yeah, great.
suggesting. Phil?
Sure,
Yeah.
happy to do that. Mayor, council members, staff, members of the public, thank you all for the opportunity to speak this evening. And in regards to project experience, probably some of the most recent experience that I have here in the Valley is owner's representative for Castle Creek Bridge and Hallam Street improvements. So I was working with, of course, for the city of Aspen and for the chief engineer, and so served on that project intimately, of course, and working on every day out on the bridge deck for 60 plus days out there on evaluating the bridge deck, what needed to be removed, what needed to be replaced from a reinforcement standpoint, and took good care of her during that time. That's your role and responsibility when you're working on bridge work in any community. In addition to that as well, up Valley, we've worked on the Aspen Country Inn. We served as an owner's representative for the city of Aspen on renovation of that facility. So moving residents out, moving residents back in, taking care of those particular aspects of that project. A lot of, obviously a lot of coordination in that project, to say the least. We are serving right now as the owner's representative for the Carbondale and Rural Fire Protection District. So we have completed the work on their bond issue for the West End Station addition and renovation, the Marble Station renovation and addition, and are now working on the Carbondale Training Facility, which will be located right beside the main building there on 300 Meadowwood. So it'll be a 3-story training facility, regional training facility for firefighters. So an exciting project, and we'll be breaking ground on that here on about June 15.
Great.
And so that's a current project. My most recent project that I'm coming off of is the Community Hospital Heart Catheter Lab down in Grand Junction. So we started that design last July. We completed the design at the end of October, started construction in November, and had our first patient on June 1.
Wow.
We were 7% under budget on the $8 million project and a month ahead of schedule, even during the middle of a pandemic and trying to get materials from Siemens out of Germany, and then as well our large Philips Azurion 7 cath lab camera that had to come out of the Netherlands. And so proud of that project. But that's just some of our recent work. Again, I've been here in the Valley for 40 plus years, been in business for myself for 32 years, and pleased to have the opportunity to meet with your staff. Appreciated the RFP process, appreciated your interview process with your staff members, and look forward to working with you. And just want to let you all know, if chosen this evening, we will be coordinating with your staff and coordinating with you. I do appreciate the opportunity to see your work this evening. Having served on public boards and currently serving on public boards, this is an important function of what we do in our republic, and so I appreciate that very, very much. And look forward to working with you, and I'll be honest and upfront with you, and I will tell you what I know, I will tell you what I don't know, and I will always have suggestions and always have ways avenues to work through whatever we're working through at that particular time. But again, I know what my role is, and that's providing you with different avenues and different concepts. You ultimately are the decision makers between your staff and the elected officials. And so I serve as a consultant for you and look forward to the opportunity. Thank you, Mayor and council members.
Thanks, Phil. Excellent. Any questions of Mr. Vaughn? Elise, I'm sorry, I can't see you over there. I don't know what.
Peripheral vision to this side.
It's the
camo.
I can't see you there.
I'm just going to ask the question that I'm sure you've been asked like 100 times before, but what kind of percentage increase have you seen in the cost of supplies during the whole COVID pandemic?
So I can give you a good example, and that was our work as owner's representative on the Rifle Metro Pool project. So we, during the course of that project, we shut down the pool complex in August of 2019, so prior to COVID, and demolished the entire facility with the exception of the main bathhouse, just 2 rooms on that, and then constructed throughout the winter, and then had everything back in operation in May prior to the start of the next season. We did not have one case of COVID on the project. What we did find is we found during that time, we did have materials increases during that time as well. So, Counselor, that materials increase probably ran It was mostly on concrete and aggregates and on some specialty items from a swimming pool standpoint, just because, as you all know, going through that current project right now, it has some specialties to it. So in that portion of that, we still saw some 10% increases in some of the materials areas. We were able to keep our pricing on all of our subcontractors solid, and we did not have any changes. The ultimate goal on that was to come in under budget, and we did. We were at $8,008,000 budget is what we had approved with the council, and we came in 15% underneath that amount, and came in about 30 days prior to on schedule and budget. On a current project right now, which is probably a bit more instructive, because again, taking a look at projects that have been put out to bid during this, let's just call it the first quarter of 2021, that's where we've seen most of our timber increases and steel increases and other materials increases at that time. On a recent project, which I won't speak about the details of on who the client is, it is a private project. On that private project, I figured in about a 10% increase on it. What we actually found during that time is we actually ended up with closer to about a 1.5% to 2% increase. A lot of that had to do with the relationship that we have, not only with the contractor, but our relationship with the developed subcontractors, because they understand ultimately that yes, you do need to pass along certain costs, whether that's HVAC package equipment, electrical switchgear, flooring materials, lumber, whatever it might be. But ultimately, they understand the long-term relationship with an owner's representative and with the general contractor and with the owner. The way you build that is by not skinning them for 25% when things look good. So I know that's a very long answer to a short question, but I hope that's helpful.
It's a good answer. The issue that I have, though, is that we are hiring you to do cost estimation.
Correct.
And so that has nothing to do with relationships in the short term.
That is
It's
correct.
just, getting the numbers right. And,
That's accurate.
we have underestimated some of the costs for some projects that we have currently going on, particularly in this COVID environment. So I just kind of want to have confidence that that your estimates are going to be accurate to what's happening in the economy right now.
Yes, and we have been accurate in our estimating, and what I do is we take each portion of that project and we apply that with different numbers. So I don't just do a lump sum number and say, okay, I think this is going to be 12% greater. We take the lumber market and we evaluate what we currently see in the futures market, and we make the determination on it. Same thing with the steel market, same thing with concrete, gypsum board, any of the other materials that are going to be utilized in the project. So yes, I agree with you.
Great, thank you.
In this estimating process, it requires that ability to understand what the current market is.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean that I'm always right. And I'm always upfront with clients about this, that if I could be right on that and I could plan the futures market, we
You
would
wouldn't be
all,
doing this?
we would all be having this discussion elsewhere, right? That's exactly right. So you do the best job that you can with the information that you have, and that truly is the best you can do. But we've
Great.
been very successful, as you have heard in our process, both prior to COVID and during COVID, on being able to provide good, solid estimates for our public and our private customers.
Thank you.
Yes, you're very welcome.
Any further questions, comments? Okay, I would entertain a motion then, if we're ready to go.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 28, series of 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll for us.
Happily, thank you. Elise Huddle,
Yes.
Bill Kane,
Yes.
Ryan Slack,
Yes.
Barry Tenenbaum,
Yes?
Bill Infante,
Yes.
Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
I got everybody, 6-0. Motion carries unanimously.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. That's our,
Thank you.
Look forward to
That's our
serving you.
last-
Thank you. Have a good evening.
last formal item, and we get Ryan Slack to bed by 9 o'clock, which I understand is his bedtime hour, so that's a good thing, huh?
Whatever it takes.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
We're adjourned.
Yeah.
Good night.
Lot of stuff in there.
It's interesting.
That was a meaty one.
Have
Never mind.
more